Well, before anti-Trump protesters turned violent in the Golden State, public officials tried blocking Trump from even getting the chance to speak in the Golden State. So, who do you think is getting more attention? We report, you deride. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto. And think about this. If you can't beat them, muzzle them. Because before these Trump protests in California, a number of top public officials there were doing their darndest to make sure Trump never got the chance to speak at all in California, at least not at a public facility. Now, Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton using such public venues, that's fine. The Donald, not so fine. My point here is not to really get a judgment on Donald Trump. I don't really care what you think. But is it the taxpayers who are the ones ultimately getting trumped? Charles Payne, Jerry Willis, Charlie Gasparino, along with Scott Martin and Jessica Tarlow. Dagan McDowell, as you just saw, was sub-hosting on Bulls and Bears. Of course, Ben Stein off this week. We've got Charles on all of these developments here. We pick and choose our battles, huh?
Well, we pick and choose our battles, but apparently the tolerant left always seems to be so intolerant at certain points. And listen, it's ironic because I remember Ben Shapiro not too long ago having the same problem. So you could imagine, he wanted to talk to college kids and they blocked him. California is a hotbed for this kind of sort of anti-constitutional, anti-rights sort of stuff. But they want you to tolerate everything that's on their agenda. The hypocrisy is absolutely amazing. It really is amazing.
Not even giving him the chance to get there. Now, maybe his supporters say, well, do we want to run into a buzzsaw like this? But who are they to decide?
Exactly right. Look, they were angry about divisive rhetoric. That's what they defined as their issue. On those grounds, the president couldn't speak there because the president is divisive. He points out different groups, but he points out groups nonetheless, and he derides them.
What do you think, Desmond?
I think they essentially incited this riot. I mean, here's the thing. I've been very critical of Donald and his demeanor. I'll still be critical of that. But, you know, when you get public officials going out there saying, we don't want Trump in our backyard, that is a clarion call to these lunatics that you see on the stage to show up and start a riot. And I believe these California people should be held, these California officials should be held responsible. And maybe there should be some charge. I mean, maybe they should be charged with something. This is like, you can't just yell fire in a crowded
No,
you cannot yell fire in a crowded movie theater, and that's what they are doing here. They are inciting a riot. That is a crime.
You know, Jessica, people are free to protest. They can do whatever they want. What bothers me about some of these public officials who wanted to keep Donald Trump from this location is that they were perfectly fine with others going to the same venues. So I would admire their consistency if they said at any public fairgrounds, let's say at Indianapolis Fairgrounds, you won't allow any candidate to go there. No, you're taking this one step further to say, no, just this particular candidate. That's offensive.
That is offensive, and I think that everyone on the right and the left should come out and say that, absolutely. You know, freedom of speech is an incredibly important protected right here, and Donald Trump has the right to speak as well. He also could end up being our president, so people are really going to have to get used to the fact that this guy is going to speak, and it doesn't look like he's going to be changing his tone or his message anytime soon. These organized protests, they have been shown to be extremely problematic and violent. I would also say that Donald Trump has played a role in this, saying things like, I'll pay legal fees, and a lot of the things. I take Jerry's point about other people using divisive language, but he's kind of the kingmaker of divisive language right now. That's how you end up with 91% of African Americans disapproving of you, 81%
a lot of candidates have divisive language and say divisive things and tick off a lot of people. Some of them don't have sort of mail-ordered protests come to but Scott Martin, my big concern is this. I mean, I sometimes think there's an agenda here beyond just sort of manufacturing a protest, real or faked. And that is this notion that if you vote for that guy, this is what you're going to get. In other words, a 1968 feel to it. Do you really want to be associated with that party when this is the type of stuff that's happening in that party? I just think it's just underneath the surface as a layer of doubt.
Yes, they're trying to coax voters. They're picking winners and losers. You know, they're taking away the right for Trump and his ralliers to come and say their message or their piece, yet allowing the protesters to go and do what they don't want Trump to do, which is actually speak out. I think Charlie's absolutely right. I think this actually incites the riots and actually legitimizes the rioters to go out and cause more trouble.
And here's what's even worse about this. This is a public fairground.
That's right.
that's illegal. You're keeping a public official from speaking. It's not like we're forcing Facebook or Apple out in Cupertino to listen to Donald Trump's spiel about building a wall. This is a public fairground. He deserves, like every public official, they should open it up. And by basically doing this, that public official has done.
There are quite a few.
Yeah, but they've done on a wider range what Donald did in some cases at his own rallies, which was incite violence.
Well, Charles, here's what I can guarantee the type of coverage that will ensue as the weekend goes on and next week, that we'll get plenty of shots, if there are any, of Trump people going after these who are protesting. Nevertheless, when they're the protesters going after the Trump people, zero coverage.
Zero coverage, or it's ambiguous as to what exactly went on. All we know are two things: violence and Donald Trump.
Right.
So if
that's the idea. This is what happens anytime Donald Trump's in town.
If you're a casual observer of the political scene, because we're into it, but not everyone is into it the way we are. Not everyone studies this stuff.
Donald Trump begets violence.
Yeah, and this is not what we want.
Even though in these cases it's been a lot of violence against Trump people.
Right. And that's where these officials come in. Not only do they do the setup, but they're famous for enabling this kind of stuff, whether it's students walking out of these public schools carrying Mexican flags.
Who are these protesters? It's like the minimum wage protesters. Where are those minimum wage workers?
You always have to ask that question, and the best way to figure it out is to go to the event and see who's sponsoring it, who is making this happen, who's supplying the balloons, who's got the band.
Who backed up Occupy Wall Street, the UFT here in New York City? The only thing I would say, Neil, in response, I would say, Donald asked for some of this. I mean, the way he comported himself at some of his rallies, I just don't think that's right.
But here's the thing.
And by the way,
let me just say one thing.
When you put the red flag in front of the bull, he's going to come.
I think you have to. I think we got to get to a point though where we say, okay, you can say Donald Trump and how divisive he might have been, particularly early on in the campaign, but his supporters, regular people who want to hear this,
I agree,
they shouldn't be targeted. In other words, and this is the point I was trying to make. The officials understood that this was a powder keg. They allowed it to get out of hand.
They incited it.
They incited it. They manipulated it. They allowed it to get out of hand. And that's where they were wrong.
If you truly believe his speech is so offensive, let him say it. The world can figure it out. You don't have to tell us what it is.
And Jessica, that's my point with all of this. And I should posit here that Donald Trump won't come on my shows. He thinks I'm unfair to him, doesn't like me. That's fine. Many don't. My only point in saying this, though, is that that's not fair, that's not balanced, that's not right. And I think when you ignore the type of dust-ups we've seen with the Black Lives Matter crowd and how they disrupt Bernie Sanders events, Hillary Clinton events, Bill Clinton events, and give that a fraction of the coverage, even though that could be very scary as well, that is not being fair to all candidates.
I do agree with you. I think especially with the Bill Clinton protests where he got into the back and forth about the super predator term, I think that did get a lot of coverage actually. But generally,
yeah, but what did he do the very next day? He was so bowled over by the reaction it was getting among liberals that he had to apologize to the very people who were treating him like he was pond scum.
Yes, I understand, but that's politics today, and I think we all know where Bill Clinton stands on that issue. And what he needs to do.
Is it the same understanding with Donald Trump and his events, and whether he gets a chance to comment on any issue?
Well, he takes hours of coverage a day to comment on every issue. If Donald Trump wants to say something, he does say it. He calls a press conference. He sees someone doing something else, and he says, hey, bring the attention back to me.
You sound like you're condoning this.
Well, he's the leading
No, I'm absolutely not, and especially back to thinking about that Chicago protest that MoveOn.org organized. I don't think that it's right.
We're not seeing riots at the John Kasich rally. I mean, there is something.
You need people. You
have to have people.
You start with people.
Okay, we're not. We're not seeing riots at anybody else's. I would just say this. I think these California people should be charged with a crime for inciting a riot. That said, Donald bears some responsibility for this. He has stoked anger at his rallies.
All right, you can stoke anger, but that doesn't mean people shut you down in the process.
I agree with that.
Scott, the one thing I'm looking at going forward, though, is the message, maybe not so subliminal, that America, this guy Trump, the Republicans are close to nominating. You want this? And I think someone's going to play this split screen with 1968. I guarantee it. Maybe Charles Payne and I are the only guys who can remember that. Mere children. But my point to say, do you really want that? You might like the guy, but if this is what happens every day in his administration, what do you think?
And to that point, it may backfire. That may just actually stoke the interest. It may stoke the actual reason for people to come out and vote for this guy because they're like, hey, we're going to push it right back in your face.
Nixon was elected, right?
He was, but yeah, he took advantage of that.
In a landslide.
All right.
No, not a landslide the first time. The
first time was very, very close.
The second time he was.
That convention, that summer for Democrats didn't help Hubert Humphrey.